In the early 1970s, something surprisingly ordinary began changing the way America ate dinner. It wasn't a fancy new stove, a celebrity cookbook, or a restaurant chain. It was a simple countertop cooker that quietly promised families one thing they suddenly needed more than ever: time. Within just a few years, millions of these little pots found their way into American kitchens, turning inexpensive cuts of meat and humble pantry staples into meals that simmered all day without anyone standing over the stove. Some of the dinners it made became household legends. Others slowly disappeared as fast food, microwave ovens, and busy schedules took their place. One meal on today's countdown was once considered the ultimate Sunday comfort food, while another helped stretch a few dollars into supper for an entire family. So join me as we count down 10 forgotten crock-pot dinners from the 1970s that almost nobody makes anymore. Number 10. Beef stew. Before slow cookers became a fixture in American kitchens, a proper beef stew demanded an entire afternoon. It wasn't difficult, but it asked for something many families were beginning to run short on: time. Brown chunks of beef chuck until a rich crust forms, then place them into the crock-pot with potatoes, carrots, celery, onion, and just enough beef broth to surround everything without drowning it. Let the gentle heat work its quiet magic for the rest of the day. By supper, the meat could be pulled apart with nothing more than a fork, while the vegetables had absorbed every drop of savory flavor. For countless families in the 1970s, this wasn't simply another recipe. It was the reassuring smell that greeted everyone at the front door, proving that even after a long day's work, a homemade dinner was still waiting around the table. Number 9. Pot roast. For many Americans, no dinner captured the feeling of home quite like a pot roast. It was the meal that filled the house with a rich aroma long before anyone gathered around the table. A well-marbled chuck roast was first seared until deeply browned, then nestled into the crock-pot over chunky carrots, potatoes, and onions. A splash of beef broth and a handful of simple seasonings were all it needed before the lid went on for the day. Hour after hour, the roast slowly surrendered to the gentle heat until it became so tender that a fork could pull it apart without effort. The vegetables soaked up every drop of those savory juices, becoming almost as memorable as the beef itself. During the 1970s, this wasn't reserved for holidays or special occasions. It transformed an ordinary weekday into something that felt like Sunday dinner, bringing families together with nothing more than patience and the comforting promise of a homemade meal. Number 8. Crock-pot baked beans. Long before backyard barbecues became crowded with disposable trays and store-bought side dishes, baked beans were prepared the slow way. They weren't rushed because they simply couldn't be. Dried navy beans were soaked overnight, then placed into the crock-pot with diced onion, brown sugar, molasses, dry mustard, and a piece of salt pork that slowly flavored the entire pot. A little water was all that was needed before the lid stayed closed for the rest of the day. As the hours passed, the beans became creamy without falling apart, while the sauce thickened into a rich, sweet glaze that coated every spoonful. During the 1970s, this was more than just a side dish. It was the centerpiece at church picnics, family reunions, holiday cookouts, and neighborhood potlucks. Inexpensive to make yet generous enough to feed a crowd, these baked beans reminded everyone that some of America's greatest meals came from the simplest ingredients and a full day of patient cooking. Number 7. Hungarian goulash. Before weeknight dinners came from the freezer aisle, Hungarian goulash was one of the smartest ways to turn an affordable cut of beef into a meal that tasted like it belonged on a Sunday table. Cubes of beef were first browned with onions and green peppers, creating the deep flavor that every good goulash depended on. From there, everything moved into the crock-pot with tomatoes, beef broth, garlic, and a generous spoonful of sweet Hungarian paprika, the spice that gave the dish its unmistakable color and warmth. The lid stayed closed for the next several hours while the beef slowly softened into fork-tender bites, and the sauce transformed into a thick, rich gravy. Ladled over buttery egg noodles, it became a dinner that could satisfy the hungriest family after a long day. Across America in the 1970s, countless households had their own treasured version, often handed down from parents or grandparents who had brought old European traditions with them. The Crock-pot made it possible to preserve those family recipes without spending the entire afternoon standing over the stove, and for many families, that made all the difference. Number 6. Chicken and dumplings. Few meals captured the feeling of comfort quite like chicken and dumplings. On chilly evenings in the 1970s, the aroma drifting from the crock-pot was often enough to tell everyone supper was almost ready. Bone-in chicken simmered slowly with celery, onions, carrots, and a rich chicken broth until the meat became so tender it slipped away from the bones with almost no effort. Only then were spoonfuls of biscuit dough placed gently on top, where they steamed into soft, fluffy dumplings instead of baking into a crust. As they cooked, they naturally thickened the broth into a creamy, velvety gravy that wrapped around every bite of chicken. It was filling, inexpensive, and could stretch to feed a large family without anyone leaving the table hungry. For many Americans, this wasn't just another cold-weather dinner. It was the meal that followed snowstorms, sick days, and Sunday afternoons spent with grandparents. The Crock-pot gave busy families the chance to keep that tradition alive, turning a recipe that once demanded constant attention into one that quietly took care of itself until everyone finally came home. Number 5. Sauerkraut with kielbasa. There was a time when the unmistakable aroma of sauerkraut and kielbasa drifting through the house meant supper had already been taken care of. For countless families with Polish, German, and Eastern European roots, this wasn't simply another dinner. It was a tradition that had crossed the Atlantic generations earlier. A bed of sauerkraut was spread into the crock-pot, then topped with thick slices of smoky kielbasa, a chopped apple, a little brown sugar, and a sprinkle of caraway seeds to soften the sharpness of the cabbage. As everything slowly cooked together, the sausage released its rich flavor while the apples melted into the broth, adding just enough sweetness to balance every bite. By evening, the kraut had become mellow and tender, and the kielbasa was juicy enough to cut with the side of a fork. During the 1970s, this hearty meal appeared on dinner tables from Pennsylvania to the Midwest, especially when the weather turned cold. It was simple, affordable, and deeply satisfying, a reminder that some of America's most cherished comfort foods began as old family recipes brought from another corner of the world. Number 4. Crock-pot meatloaf. For generations of American families, meatloaf was the dependable dinner that showed up whenever the grocery budget had to stretch a little farther. The only drawback was keeping it from drying out in the oven. The crock-pot quietly solved that problem. Ground beef was mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, onions, and simple seasonings, then shaped into a loaf and placed inside the slow cooker, often raised slightly so the extra grease could drain away as it cooked. A generous coating of ketchup, brown sugar, and a touch of mustard slowly transformed into a glossy glaze that wrapped the entire loaf in sweet and savory flavor. After several unhurried hours, every slice stayed moist, tender, and sturdy enough to serve with mashed potatoes or buttered green beans. During the 1970s, this became one of the most trusted weekday dinners for busy American households. Parents could prepare everything before leaving for work, return home to a fully cooked meal, and gather everyone around the table without spending another hour in the kitchen. That's why so many people still remember crock-pot meatloaf as tasting even better the next day. Number 3. Stuffed green peppers. Before casseroles filled the freezer and frozen dinners filled supermarket shelves, stuffed green peppers were one of the most satisfying ways to turn a handful of everyday ingredients into a complete family meal. Bright green bell peppers were carefully hollowed out, then packed with a hearty mixture of seasoned ground beef, cooked rice, chopped onions, and tomato sauce before being arranged upright inside the crock-pot. As they slowly cooked, the peppers became soft enough to cut with a fork while holding their shape, and the filling absorbed every bit of the rich tomato flavor surrounding it. By dinner time, each pepper was its own perfectly portioned meal, with tender vegetables, savory meat, and fluffy rice in every bite. Throughout the 1970s, this dinner appeared on tables across America because it was affordable, filling, and made excellent use of garden-fresh peppers during the summer months. More importantly, the crock-pot spared home cooks from heating up the kitchen on hot afternoons, allowing families to enjoy a homemade supper without ever turning on the oven. It's the kind of practical, comforting recipe that quietly disappeared as convenience foods took over. Number 2. Ham and scalloped potatoes. In many American homes, nothing ever went to waste, especially after a Sunday ham dinner. By the middle of the week, the leftovers found a second life in one of the most comforting crock-pot meals of the 1970s. Thin slices of potatoes were layered with diced ham, onions, and a creamy sauce made from pantry staples, creating a hearty dinner with almost no extra expense. As the hours passed, the potatoes slowly absorbed every bit of the smoky ham flavor while the sauce thickened into a rich, velvety coating that held the entire dish together. By supper, each forkful offered tender potatoes, savory pieces of ham, and creamy goodness that tasted like it had been prepared with far more effort than it actually required. Families loved it because everything cooked together in one pot, leaving very little cleanup and no need to heat the oven. During an era when stretching the grocery budget mattered, this wasn't simply another leftover meal. It became proof that yesterday's holiday dinner could become today's warm, satisfying supper, bringing the whole family back to the table one more time. Number 1. Round steak casserole. No dinner represented the hardworking spirit of 1970s America better than round steak casserole. It wasn't made with expensive cuts or fancy ingredients. Instead, it relied on patience, practicality, and the belief that a simple meal could still bring a family together. Strips of round steak were lightly coated in seasoned flour and browned before being layered in the crock-pot with sliced potatoes, carrots, onions, and tomatoes. As the slow hours passed, the vegetables softened into the beef juices while the flour naturally thickened everything into a rich, hearty gravy. By the time everyone came home, the once-stuffed steak had become fork tender, and every spoonful carried the deep flavor that only a full day of gentle cooking could create. During the 1970s, this was the kind of supper busy parents depended on because it asked for very little after breakfast and rewarded them with an entire meal by evening. It wasn't elegant, and it was never meant to be. It was affordable, filling, and made from ingredients almost every family already had in the kitchen. That's exactly why so many Americans remember it with such affection, even though it's rarely seen on dinner tables today. Those were 10 forgotten crock-pot dinners that once brought comfort to millions of American families. They weren't expensive, complicated, or meant to impress anyone. They simply filled the house with wonderful smells, gathered loved ones around the table, and reminded us that the best meals were often the ones made with patience instead of speed. If one of these dishes brought back a memory of your mother, grandmother, or someone special who made it for you, we'd love to hear about it. Tell us in the comments which of these meals you still remember, or better yet, which one you still make today. And if you enjoyed this journey back to the kitchens of the 1970s, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and join us next time as we uncover more forgotten recipes, traditions, and memories from the America we remember.